Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I apologize for the longer than expected pause. I took a vacation to visit my family. I streamed once, but wasn't that much in the mood. Plus, there was a surprisingly small amount of Apple related news, leaks, rumors, even like counter products like competition like the latest Oppo and Vivo. They just don't interest me that much, so hopefully you got your fix somewhere else during the time. But I am back. Hopefully we'll get more leaks, more rumors, more news this time around, given the fact that we're getting closer and closer to WWDC. Now 1.5 months away, even a little bit less. I apologize for my very poofy hair. I will get a new haircut sometime soon, but this day is not today. I'm just happy that I've rebuilt all my streaming setup at home. I'm back to work. So we'll find the time for all the additional stuff whenever I get to it. Now, we have a bunch of topics to talk about today, each of them slightly smaller than we usually like to make our main topic at the very least. However, there is a nice amount of things that actually interest me personally. First of all, we're going to talk about a supposed color leak for the new iPhone 17 Pro. Now, you guys know my relationship with Majin Buu. Like, I used to distrust the guy a lot, but a lot of what he has been leaking for the 17 series is being corroborated by other big leakers in the field. So, yeah, this is why I'm covering him. Next, we'll actually get to iPhone 17e news, which is our first kind of official, nothing official about it, but it's our first major new leak about the E lineup becoming an actual lineup, not just a one-off thing for the iPhone 16 series. And it's actually coming from a Chinese supply chain leaker who I have learned to trust a decent amount ever since I started this channel. We'll also get into a tiny bit of politics. However, this one is actually interesting in my opinion. It's not just will prices go up, will prices go down. It's about Apple and their compliance and or lack thereof with the Digital Markets Act in the European Union. Apple is being fined 500 million euros. Meta is being fined 200 million. So with those companies with like their ridiculous sizes and market valuations and profitability, those are still amounts of money that they would care about. So yeah, if this was 100 million for Apple, 50 million for Meta or whatever, I probably wouldn't even be covering it. And it's not like they cannot swallow 200 or 500 million or even a few billion of losses here and there, but it's just something it reaches a certain size at which I believe it's worth covering. And we'll also cover a little bit about the Siri situation. I've brought up in several previous streams how a Siri's internal team has been like reworked under the leadership of the guy who was responsible for Apple Vision Pro. I know some people are like laughing, oh my god, it's the guy responsible for Apple's flop. Like, you realize that this guy is not responsible for marketing the Vision Pro, and the guy is not responsible for pricing the Vision Pro. His job was just to make a great piece of hardware and actually even a software platform for it. And in my opinion, Apple Vision Pro is the most refined first generation Apple product that we have probably ever seen. It's definitely better than the first generation iPhone. It's leagues ahead of the first generation iPad. It's like it's like orders of magnitude ahead of what the original Apple Watch was. So we'll get to some of the details and how the team is changing. It's probably not as flashy as a piece of news as some others, but to me this is interesting because I don't have a problem with Giandrea, like the previous leader there and the guy who's responsible for like Apple's broader like Apple intelligence focus. But I do prefer that Apple is treating Siri more like its own platform now, right? With a main engineer, a team that's responsible to him, and they're focusing on only one job. And obviously they need the research and development that comes from the broader Apple intelligence team. However, that team still can work by itself, right? It can develop LLMs, it can lend out workers to the Siri team whenever needed, and vice versa. So I do like some of the restructurings going on, and we might take a look at the very end about how scary thin the iPhone 17 Air supposedly is. I see Rosa joining the chat. Hello. I know this is YouTube always smacks my butt for my long hiatuses. I know it's hard for you guys to find your way back to the streams. I know that even like it's even if you hit like the notification bell, if I like I'm a terrible YouTuber and don't post regularly, it might not inform you of my stream. So before we get fully started with all the topics of today, I recommend you guys subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment. You guys know I love interacting with a lively comment section, getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements, your suggestions for future content. So yeah, that obviously helps. And of course, you can leave a super chat or super sticker to directly support me here. You can also become a channel member. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, and Max Maximus, who despite my long hiatuses have all remained Martech Pro Max level supporters right here on YouTube. You can also go to my Patreon. However, that one is a little bit messier. I'm trying to convert everyone who was on Patreon to YouTube. Yeah, because it's just more convenient to me to have one community. And yes, as I've outlined in a previous stream, I did create a Discord channel. Whether or not I will actually use it remains to be seen, though, because while my streams are because of my streams being a little shorter than like your regular live streamer who like streams for 8 to 10 hours a day, I do not know how relevant it would be. Riveting Tailchop finding a way into the chat saying it's algo time. Sounds like the lamest superhero of all time, but like a catchphrase. It's algo time. But thank you very much. For being here and for your continued support. It's very much appreciated. To all of you guys, no matter if you're watching live or if you're watching afterwards, it's all appreciated. But now that we have all the intro stuff out of the way, I'll definitely leave timestamps so you guys know how to skip this. This is for the people who actually want the behind the scenes stuff, and it's also usually the intro stuff is for you guys to have a little bit of time to come into the stream, to make yourself known, and stuff like that. So let's actually start. Now, again, I've already mentioned it. The first leak we're going to discuss today does come from Majin Buu, and he's talking about something that we have actually not seen Apple do before. Now, we definitely have seen blue iPhone Pros. First and foremost, of course, the Pacific Blue on the iPhone 13 Pro series. Which is kind of used as an inspiration for these images right now. And that's because the thing that we haven't seen Apple do is introduce a new iPhone color that was also introduced just that very year on a new Mac. In this case, we are talking about sky blue. I hope if you have like color seeing problems the way that I do, you still see the blue here. I know like it's actually funny to me because don't get me wrong, I fully understand that this is a very light blue color, right? Sky blue, which like technically the sky isn't even blue. It's just for us, it's perceived as blue. It doesn't matter. Those are stupid details. I know that it can look very, very silver depending on the light it's under, and especially if the lights are muted, there's basically no chance for you to see anything colorful about it. But I also see like a little bit of a syndrome where men usually have more problems distinguishing different shades of color than women do. And you really feel that the tech media is made up primarily of men, when like almost the universal reaction to this color is like, oh my god, it's so muted, you cannot see it. And I showed it to my mom and two female friends of mine, and they all could very easily see that it's blue. And I don't mean like on the website, I mean like a pic that I took in the Apple store that to me looked basically silver. I specifically did it from an angle where the blue kind of went away, and they all were like, yeah, it's blue, like it's a light blue, but it's blue. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, so this, in my opinion, beautiful but very subtle color is supposedly coming to the iPhone 17 Pro series. Obviously, the latest M4 MacBook Airs were introduced just in March, and Boo claims that sources close to the supply chain confirmed that several iPhone 17 Pro prototypes have been made in various colors. That's obviously true no matter what, right? Colors is something that Apple wouldn't necessarily change last minute, but it's something that they can still play around with in a very late stage of development. Look, we all know like the iPhone 4 launch situation, right, where it's promised to be in white, but then it takes like 9 months to actually launch a white iPhone 4. That was back in the day. Apple is way better at colors for both glass and metal these days. Obviously, with titanium, Apple was kind of a little bit more careful, I would say, with what colors they adopt. The primary push for titanium seemed to be a very natural metallic look. But I think that now that Apple is getting more familiar with color titanium, we will see more vibrant colors, we'll see more playful colors, while still keeping in mind, of course, that we are talking about the Pro iPhones here. And Pro iPhones don't get the most vibrant colors in general. Now, there's still a potential that the iPhone 17 Pro actually launches and is made out of aluminum, which anodized aluminum is very much Apple's thing, and they are the absolute best at coloring the absolute F out of it. So if it is made out of aluminum, that's going to be very interesting. And of course, for the back, we have seen Pacific blue, so it's probably not a big stretch to imagine sky blue on the back of the iPhone Pro. So if we look at it, Pacific blue, iPhone 13 Pro, that's actually a color I myself had. So I'm not talking out of my wait, oh, I'm sorry, by the way, oh, it's not Pacific blue, is the iPhone 12 Pro color. I'm so sorry, it's Sierra blue. Also, why did I write Pacific Plus? Oh my god, my entire brain is fried. So it's Sierra blue. I apologize for misspeaking. You guys feel free to correct me whenever I get shit wrong like this. So let's find a nice pic that looks good. Yeah, so basically it's very similar, right, to this. I mean, sure, it's you can argue if it's more saturated or less, but then at the same time you have to consider that what you're seeing here is the glass. So, and the glass is always colored slightly differently than the actual chassis. Plus, this one had stainless steel, so it will not align anyway with the aluminum. And if it's now titanium, then it's going to be different still. So just pointing out, there will be no perfect matching. The only chance there is a perfect match is for the side rails of the 17 Pro to match this, if the rumor is true that the 17 Pro series is moving back to aluminum after titanium and stainless steel. Would be kind of a surprising move, but maybe Apple sees the need to really to really reduce weight and to lower production costs. It's really hard to say. Maybe it's going to be a mix of different metals. I presume that maybe by June, July, we'll be probably in the know. By that point in time, I usually expect leakers like Min-Chi Kuo and Mark Gurman to have very precise understanding of the next iPhone. But for now, we are still a tiny bit in the dark. Now, when it comes to the actual color, obviously it's a pretty one. Obviously, we have covered how it could kind of match Sierra Blue. I apologize for calling it Pacific Blue. Oh, I apologize. Bless me, I guess. Pacific blue, that was the iPhone 12 color. Yep. That's the iPhone 12 Pro color, of course, to be more precise. With the iPhone the 12 having just regular blue. This is when we really got into like interesting naming schemes at that point. That's not even to mention the fact that like space gray has been like redefined 1 billion times ever since its introduction. This is a very dark image of this, but I hope you still get the gist that it's a darker blue. And when actually the iPhone 13 Pro came out, a lot of people were disappointed to be losing Pacific blue. But even though dark blue is actually my favorite color, I always preferred Sierra Blue. Once I actually saw the product in my hand, because it just felt much more playful. While with Pacific Blue, it is not as discolored as it looks here, but it's also very easy to sometimes just look somewhat too grayish for my taste. And yeah, when you look at just the iPhone 12 in blue, whatever. Right, that blue was gorgeous. I think if you are just going to make a very blue, that's the way to do it. And or like something on what we have seen on the iPhone 16 series. What is it? Aquamarine. I always forget the color names. That they're stupid to me. Yeah, but this was probably my favorite blue ever on an iPhone. But Sierra Blue, definitely a great color too, and Sky Blue, very much inspired by it, or like a spiritual successor. And we already know it was very well received on the MacBook Air. So maybe Apple is playing around with it, and it looks like it could be one of the winners and become one of the colors for the 17 Pro series. Yeah, obviously, with like, it depends on the actual like material they're gonna choose. If they're sticking with titanium, that means obviously some colors are taken already, right? If we go to the Apple website here, jump to the iPhone 16 Pro, and look at the colors it's offering. Let's look at the Max, right? So Desert Titanium, that's kind of their take on gold, right? It's going to be interesting if that one sticks around. To be honest, it's not a color I have seen a lot in the wild. So I'm not sure if it sold well enough for Apple to keep it around. And that's kind of Apple's colorful one for this generation, right? A lot of us suspected that we might get like, I don't know, a green or a red iPhone Pro like as a spring refresh this year. We didn't. That kind of leaves us with no like colors, right? We have like contrasts and gray levels and I guess gold, right? But like, man, it's a very, very like, in my opinion, needed thing to bring some color into the iPhone Pro lineup. And Sky Blue definitely sounds like a great choice. My personal preference would be just to make it the fifth version, right? Just to give users some more choice. But I can just see them kicking out Desert Titanium. Black, obviously, that one is kind of needed to keep around to satisfy MKBHD. Cannot make him angry by removing matte black. White titanium is basically silver. And natural titanium is, well, it's natural titanium. It's gray with a grayish look on the glass. And with all the hatred towards the removal of colors, it actually seems like this might be the most preferred color choice that I see from people buying iPhone 16 Pros. So, yeah, definitely, if one would go away, it would most likely be Desert Titanium here. But beyond that, there isn't that much to leak here or else to cover. Should be noted that Majin Buu did leak a color previously correctly, which is Desert Titanium for the iPhone 16 Pro. Now, he wasn't the only one, but that's obviously still worth something. However, obviously, he got some stuff wrong as well. So take everything he or any leaker, including Min Chi Kuo, Ross Young, Mark Gurman, say with a pinch of salt or more, maybe sometimes a mountain of salt. But yeah, this is a leak that I definitely saw is worth covering. For one, I think it's a leak that is very easy to understand, right? It's a new iPhone with a new iPhone color. And it also gives us room to speculate again, oh, how would that look in aluminum versus titanium and stuff like that. Plus, of course, you see the new camera layout that most leakers seem to be now on board with. We also have confirmed that this camera bar would have the same color as like the rest of the body, so no two-tone look, and no like pure black as some people had initially speculated for this, to make like the cameras basically invisible or something like that. So yeah, that lines up very well to cover in like one piece of big rumors. The next leak is actually, to me, very interesting because this is something that has been on my mind ever since Apple introduced the iPhone 16e as the iPhone 16e. If they had just introduced it as the iPhone SE 4, or 5? No, I think it would have been 4. It wouldn't. Wait. Let me make sure. iPhone SE 4? Yeah, it was supposed to be the iPhone SE 4. Um, let's return. Obviously, if Apple had called it the iPhone SE 4, I would have known almost by definition that it would be subject to the upgrade schedule of previous iPhone SEs, right? Roughly 3 years, introduced in the beginning of the year, designed to be actually pretty cheap, right? It's not even though it matches the current generation of iPhones in certain spec points. Maybe it has the same camera. Usually, it has the same chip and stuff like that, right? Or at least it gives you finally 5G, like the main iPhone, right? With the iPhone 16e, you can argue about how well it's executed, right? It's small main camera sensor, it's relatively dim OLED screen by modern standards. Right, we can discuss all of that. The removal of MagSafe, of course. I have plenty of criticism for the iPhone 16e. Mr. George Best, hey, that's you now joining twice in a row after a relatively long break. Thank you, man. Always appreciate you having you here. Um, but obviously, calling the iPhone 16e implied something different to me than the iPhone SE. It implied that it could actually be bound to the latest generation iPhone in branding, but also in features. And with features, it would require regular upgrades. Now, would those upgrades necessarily be annual? No, they could be 18 months, maybe even 24, right? Apple obviously has no problem keeping around older gen iPhones in the lineup to make it cheaper. But to me, honestly, this suggested that Apple would do a little bit of what we saw with the MacBook Air this year, right? And I just removed the Apple website with the MacBook Air by going back. But think about it, the MacBook Air M4 removed both the cheaper M2 version and the more expensive M3 version. Now, obviously, I don't expect Apple to shift around iPhone pricing that much, but what I would expect is Apple, instead of trying to endlessly build an old iPhone over and over again, instead they would upgrade basically every iPhone once a year, and then maybe keep one previous generation around to keep prices somewhat low. And at that point, instead of dropping the price of an iPhone 16 or 16 Plus, they could instead just keep around the 16e. Right? That makes so much sense when you think about it. They've already stopped selling Pro models as previous in prior years, in the years after their release. So when you think about it, why not stop that for the main iPhones? And maybe in the future we would have an iPhone last gen E right? An iPhone current gen E, an iPhone current gen and Air or Plus, however you want to structure it, and then an iPhone current gen Pro and Pro Max, or maybe at that point it would be renamed to iPhone Ultra or something like that. That to me just makes a lot of sense. Now, reusing old parts is definitely something Apple likes to do, but being married to a product that is basically set in stone and that is older, it doesn't make as much sense, because when you think about it, there are some fixed price things inside an iPhone, including things like MagSafe, right? It's literally like a ring of magnets that doesn't get much cheaper over the years. It's not that expensive, right? But if Apple wanted to make a cheaper iPhone and they were looking at things to cut, instead of selling you an iPhone 15 or 14 or 13, which are outdated in other ways, and then just taking out MagSafe from those products and then calling them iPhone 15 minus MagSafe, they would just reuse a lot of the same hardware, but rename the product, give it a newer chip, and more properly differentiate the lineup. And it would also allow them to start a new marketing cycle for each and every new product. So if Apple has like new features in iOS 19.4, right? That and around that time is also when the iPhone 17e comes out. That's a perfect way to combine those two things. Mr. George Best, in my opinions, iPhone should adopt a 1.5-year cycle, so September and March events. I actually am not against the idea, but you have to understand that Apple is bound to larger forces here, right? At this point, the media cycle has adjusted to an annual iPhone release. Plus, Apple has March, like the iPhone 16e came out in February, right? So Apple wouldn't upgrade all iPhones on an 18-month cycle. They would upgrade the main and the pros in September. And then this one, now this one is rumored to come actually in May of 2026. So maybe Apple thinks they need a larger gap between the main series and the E, so it doesn't cannibalize it too early or something like that. But the other point is also like, it just would confuse people, because carrier contracts run on years, right? Sure, sometimes you get 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but at least you know, if you get your iPhone like day one, you know that by the time your contract runs out, there will be some new iPhone out there, right? And it's media, it's carriers that have adjusted to annual upgrades. It's also, of course, Apple's shareholders. So while I fully understand that, obviously, as hardware matures, it would be more advantageous both to us as consumers and Apple to just take it a little bit slower and wait for whatever new hardware's out there. Like, for example, if between the iPhone 16 and 17 we had an 18-month gap, it's very likely that the iPhone 17 Pro would actually come with a 2-nanometer chip, right? Because 2-nanometer is not really ready for an iPhone releasing in September, but it would most likely be ready for an iPhone releasing in March, right? So I fully understand your argument here. Now, do I expect that to happen, or would I even argue for it like publicly? Not really, because I just think that there's so much riding on the iPhone business, plus all the other related things, that I just don't see it changing, right? At some point, it might just be better for Apple to like do the most basic chip replacement in an iPhone and call it a day, then like worry, oh my God, what would happen if we pushed it out to 18 months? But I fully understand your thinking. Yeah, Apple. The problem is with Apple going green. You have to understand, right? If Apple goes with 18-month cycles, it doesn't really change the entire amount of iPhones sold, right? Plus, if Apple doesn't sell out of all last gen iPhones, that still leaves like Amazon, third party retailers that would just like, do you think that Apple will just destroy like last gen iPhones that weren't just got upgraded? The fact that they aren't sold through Apple's website does not mean that they will not be sold through some other channel, or that they won't be used internally at Apple, or that they won't be sold to companies, right? Which usually just like can negotiate with Apple much more directly than we can as consumers, right? If a company comes to Apple and says, "Bro, we need 5,000 iPhones for this price," and Apple would be like, "Oh, well, we still have some of those older iPhones lying around." They would be like, "Oh, that's fine. That's more than we need for the kind of work we expect that iPhone to do." Again, I fully understand your point, George Best, but it's probably not happening at least anytime soon. Maybe at some point tech becomes so mature that Apple just switches to a 2-year cycle, right? Who knows? And then maybe they sell an iPhone for a year, and then instead of fully dropping its price, they just give you like, I don't know, some included niceties like after a year, right? Like Apple Arcade, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple One subscriptions, right? If you buy that iPhone after a year, and then once the next iPhone comes around, it resets the price, it resets the bonuses or lack thereof that you get. But we aren't there yet. We kind of expected to be there with laptops, to be honest, right? With Macs in general. But now Apple Silicon is pushing us to a 1-year upgrade cycle. For a while, we thought, oh, it's at 18 months roughly. So what if it changes to 24 months? Now the tech is more mature. But here now Apple comes along and says, you know what? We are just upgrading our processors every year. We might have new Wi-Fi tech or a new Thunderbolt standard to adopt, or faster storage, or more storage, or more RAM, or faster RAM, right? And it's or a brighter screen, or a faster screen, right? And those individual trickle down points, whenever it's the old Rene Ritchie thing, right? Where it's like you might not go to the bakery every day, right? But you expect fresh bread to be there every day. So they cannot say, "Oh, we know most people are only coming like on Wednesday, so let's not make fresh bread on Tuesday." Right, and I think that Apple is kind of understanding that here. Now, one thing that I wanted to discuss with the 17E, beyond, of course, its May 2026 release date, which I guess I've discussed that now. It's supposedly May 2026. It's also the way that the leaker is covering it. He says that the iPhone 17e could go head-to-head for market share with another mid-range device from a rival smartphone vendor that typically releases new models around the same time. That's important. Chinese companies do like their March, April, May refreshes. Some of them go to the highest end ultra segment. Some of them are in the mid-range segment, though obviously Xiaomi's mid-range devices are a lot cheaper than than even the iPhone 16e. They are more hardware competitive with the regular iPhone 16, and still will have features like promotion that the regular mainstream iPhones don't have. So obviously Apple does have other levers to pull, like their ecosystem, their brand power, their processors, but still, like the direct competition with Chinese devices, I don't see that as much of a thing. But I do understand that Apple would want at least to capture some of the media cycle around the time these other devices are revealed, right? So we just got the 16E for $600 in late February. Should be noted, just as I predicted, it's pretty easy to get it for around $550 already. By June, I would expect it to be pretty easy to get it around $520 or something like that. Now, when you actually look at my thumbnail, I actually put a regular iPhone 16 in the thumbnail, not a 16e, and not a 17E, whatever. And that's because my prediction is that the 17E would switch the iPhone E lineup from a notch based OLED screen to a dynamic island OLED screen, right? Because don't forget, there are points where it's currently on the same level as an iPhone 16. I mean, sure, it's a darker screen at 800 nits rather than 2000 nits. It's not quite as vibrant. But it is 60 hertz. So by the time the regular iPhone 17 and 17 Air switch to ProMotion variable refresh rate LTPO displays, right? Plus, I would expect the 17 Pro to maybe even go beyond 2000 nits of peak brightness. If this iPhone were just to inherit the display of the iPhone 16, right? 2000 nits of peak brightness, pretty vibrant, but still 60 hertz, slightly thicker bezels than the Pro model, I think it would be a very nice way to differentiate it from the rest of the lineup while still making it much more premium than the current 16E is. Now, would there be room for Apple to do dual cameras? Maybe. My speculation would be that we get instead a larger main camera, if at all, right? A lot of people seem pretty happy about just having the smallest possible camera bump. Would I expect features like ultra wideband and MagSafe to make its way there? Quite honestly, I don't know. From the people who are actually buying these products, not like us enthusiasts who are probably mostly pro users anyway, I just don't see people who buy the iPhone 16e complain about the lack of those features. I just don't think they care. So I don't think that Apple would care too much. Obviously, if they launch it at May by that point, it would be very likely that Apple has a second generation C2 modem as a successor to the C1 cellular modem they introduced on the iPhone 16e. So there's plenty to upgrade without making it such a big deal that it risks cannibalizing the main iPhone lineup. Plus, of course, the main iPhone lineup is getting the Air, which is kind of like the most exciting redesign we've had for a while. The Pros are getting larger batteries, brand new cooling tech, 48 megapixel telephotos. So I just don't really see the E's ever cannibalizing the main lineup too strongly, but maybe a newer design would at least make it more competitive with like those Xiaomi and Vivo devices that universally have pretty slim borders around the screen. None of them are notched. Obviously, granted, none of them have a Face ID like technology, but Apple doesn't need a notch for Face ID these days either. So those are just some of my thoughts. None of that is being covered here, but it will be interesting. And the reason why I'm covering this coming from Fixed Focus Digital is because Fixed Focus Digital has done some successful leaks in the past. So this is not just me repeating something completely random. And it's just going to be interesting to see how exactly Apple chooses to upgrade it. If some pain points remain, or if Apple just entirely like upends the value system and changes it drastically. I always like to bring up the iPhone XR versus the iPhone 11, right? Where, the iPhone XR, obviously the 720p LCD screen and the thick borders and right, but it was a $750 product. And then the iPhone 11 comes out and it has dual cameras, much better cameras. And it actually matches the amount of RAM from the Pro models. It gets a big boost in battery life. Granted, 10% is not as huge, but the iPhone XR back in the day was actually had a better battery life than the iPhone XS or XS Max. So the iPhone 11 being better than that was a big deal. And it was $50 cheaper, right? So Apple absolutely is capable of making a cheaper device and then improving its value still with the next generation. So whether or not that happens here, if maybe Apple, I don't see them dropping the price because with the tariff uncertainty, with currency fluctuations all over the world, I think $600 is a decent base price. But I see Apple changing stuff like the design and then keeping the chip updated, that will make this device like good. I know that's a strange thing to say. Obviously, a $600 product should be good, but I am looking at it from the perspective of like an enthusiast who myself, even a non-pro iPhone is not very much for me. So the fact that I can call an E model good is honestly quite nice. Can I call the current 16E good? Maybe not necessarily at $600, unless you consider tariffs. But 550, and especially if you're closer to 500, then yeah, then it definitely becomes good in my opinion again. Yeah, that's about the bigger stuff for today when it comes to iPhone rumors. We'll see if anything leaks midstream, as it so often does. Let's actually look right now. Nope. Let's look at some other stuff. Now, this is not big in the sense like this is not a huge piece of hardware. It's not a major new software feature, but this is something that I've actually covered in quite a lot of detail on my channel. Granted, I did it in like one or two videos, but those videos were pretty long and pretty much focused on only one topic. But obviously, the EU has mandated Apple to open up iOS under the Digital Markets Act, right? Because Apple, they had found that Apple basically had a functional monopoly because the iOS market is important enough by itself to be basically considered its own market. And they basically regulated them as a gatekeeper and therefore forced them to open their gates. Now, and from the very beginning, I have said that I don't really like the way the Digital Markets Act is written. I think if you're going to mandate stuff like site loading, I honestly think you should mandate full-on site loading rather than this weird workaround with alternative marketplaces and shit like that. Like, don't get me wrong, I do benefit from stuff like this in Europe, but I would much prefer to either iOS stay fully closed, as safe as possible, Apple having as much control, hopefully not as much over the pricing of the App Store as possible, right? I have myself actually spoke out that I think it would be far better to regulate the App Store itself rather than iOS. I think you could regulate the App Store by mandating a smaller commission. So I think a 30% commission is just no longer appropriate. It just pivots way too much revenue and especially way too much profit into the hands of Apple, Google, all those platform holders, right? I think a mandated 20% maximum would be great, maybe even 15, 17%. I also think that there should have been established an independent commission that basically regulates individual decisions from those stores. So instead of having to go to a court that would have to relearn all those rules every time, I would have preferred if like remember back in the day there was like this mail app that Apple didn't allow into the store because it was like behind the subscription wall, but Apple was still requiring some free functionality inside every app, right? And they were complaining about it. I think that stuff like this should not be entirely up to Apple. I think back in the day, before they actually changed their rules, I think Apple being against cloud gaming apps was weird and was wrong. And now I'm glad that some of that has changed, but I would, instead of waiting for the benevolence of Apple, I would have preferred if this was just like one government like thing where they said, you know what, nope, you cannot force out those apps. If you really feel like forcing them out, maybe you can go to a court and maybe they will allow you to do that after a time. But at that point, you would have to deal with the backlash of consumers being used to that. And again, all of those things, the commission, the App Store rules, all of that would go away if they just mandated full-on site loading, right? Because at that point, the App Store might be a monopoly effectively, but it wouldn't be like the only way for you to download apps. And yeah, and at that point, maybe Steam could come onto iOS, right? If there were truly no limitations on how a site-loaded app could work on iOS, at least if you give it the appropriate permissions, then yeah, then you don't have to deal with Apple's weird settings page for alternative marketplaces and shit like that. So, but again, that's my part. But Apple obviously has done the minimum that was possible. And I myself have speculated that the fact that Apple charges 17% or more for apps that are being downloaded outside the App Store, because Apple is still making the argument, oh, you might not like use the payment structure of the App Store, or not the App Store itself, but you're still relying on like APIs that we developed for iOS and the Xcode environment that we create, and of course the marketing for iPhones and everything else like that, right? So you still have to pay us money. And that was always like, okay. And to me, it was weird that Europe even allowed that to begin with, right? So now, even though Europe didn't even fully, and this is really why I dislike governing through regulations rather than actual law. I know this is a law, but it's being interpreted basically on the fly by regulatory agencies, and I'm not a huge fan of that. But and they haven't even outlined in this like punishment what exactly Apple did wrong, just that they aren't compliant with it, which is honestly pretty funny to me. I am sure they probably gave Apple more details, and if Apple wants to countersue, I'm sure they would give more details to like the European High Court and stuff like that. But yeah, if it's about charging basically developers for delivering apps outside the App Store, even though, and this is how I started the coverage of this, even though I'm not a fan of the Digital Markets Act, I actually would support this punishment. And Meta is right now being charged for something for 200 million. So it's going to be interesting. Mr. George Best, I wonder if EU is treating Qualcomm the same way, given that they have the majority of the patents necessary for cellular connectivity, making them a de facto gatekeeper to 4G and 5G patents. Yeah, the consistency is very bad on that issue. Don't get me wrong. Even if I could technically like say, oh, by the nature, by the letter of the law, it seems like Apple is not in great compliance with it. Even if I dislike the law, I guess you can call me a liberal. Like, both my parents are educated as lawyers, so I have a very healthy respect for the law. However, the lack of punishment for other companies, and I guess Google was punished for a few things here and there. I actually really agree with splitting Chrome from Google. I think that is way too powerful, and I think that splitting of Chrome won't hurt Google's core businesses. I think it just will prevent a lot of like anti-competitive stuff that Google is doing. OpenAI offered to buy Chrome, which I think is quite a cool idea, in my opinion. I think it could make OpenAI pretty quickly into like one of the like Magnificent Seven, or at that point maybe Magnificent Eights. That being said, obviously we do know how browser regulations work, right? We know when Microsoft was punished for their monopoly with the Internet Explorer market. Very quickly, Chrome came in, took their lunch, rewrote like open web standards in the image of Google, right? Completely benefited Google Search, YouTube, Google Maps, Gmail over everything else, and arguably made the browser market, at least on PCs, way less competitive than it was even during the Internet Explorer days. So yeah, it's really hard to say. And then when it comes to hardware, and especially when it comes to patents, This is a really big shit show. And yeah, obviously the European Union will treat, for example, a company like Spotify with a little bit nicer hands than Apple, especially with all the current problems between Trump and, well, basically every government in the world, I guess. So I understand why this is happening, but again, it's not my favorite law to see enforced in general, and I also do see problems with the consistency of anti-competitive laws in general. That being said, I do want more regulation of big tech companies. It just is funny to me that, in my opinion, the least anti-competitive one out of all of them, Apple, is always getting punished the most by the European Union. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Apple is perfect, but out of Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, yeah, that's probably about it. Nobody else is big enough to be mentioned here. I think Apple is the one that exists in the most competitive fields, because Apple actually sells hardware, right? Amazon kind of sells hardware with Amazon Basics, but that's an entire different anti-competitive discussion. Google does not give a flying fart about the Google Pixel series. They have basically their search monopolies, their browser monopolies, almost their maps monopolies, with basically the only other major player in all of those things being Apple. Without Apple, Android would be a monopoly, and the Google Play Store being effectively a monopoly. And we actually know that Google went behind the back of well, us, right? And actually like threatened companies and bought them off so they don't put alternative stores on Android, despite Android supposedly being the open mobile operating system, right? And we know how Chrome disproportionately incentivized Google search usage, Gmail usage, Google Maps usage. So yeah, and Microsoft is a little different. Microsoft's monopolies come from a different place, like Azure. Um, um, Meta is primarily an ad thing, not even Facebook by itself, because obviously there are social medias companies that are competing. Yeah, so while Apple is definitely not perfect, I just find it funny that it's being the company targeted over and over and over again, more so than the others. Which right now it's funny because in America it's actually Google that's currently being targeted, and potentially Meta too. Meta potentially being under threat of being broken up from like WhatsApp and Instagram and all those companies that they acquired, basically stifling down competition, basically as directly and as maliciously as one can imagine. Yeah, but going from something political all over the world, let's go to something, I guess, political when it comes to Apple's internal teams. Mike Rockwell, the previous lead of the Apple Vision Pro development, is now overseeing the Siri team and is revamping it from the ground up. This is coming from Mark Gurman, writing at Bloomberg, saying Apple Inc.'s new Siri engineering chief is overhauling the management team, leading development of the beleaguered voice assistant, taking a step he assured employees would set the company up for success. Mike Rockwell, head of engineering for the assistant, is replacing much of Siri's leadership with lieutenants from his Vision Pro software group, according to people with knowledge of the matter. He's also restructuring teams related to speech, understanding, performance, and user experience. So he's definitely looking at bigger changes than just the leadership. Said the people who asked not to be identified because the changes are private. My only question now is, we've heard that a lot of it is like, what, 66% complete or whatever. I wonder if restructuring the team could result in more delays, but not delays because, oh, everything was started from the ground up, but simply because this will be taking up days, weeks, potentially a month or two internally for everyone to adjust to. It's going to be very interesting. And Angelica joining the chat. Hello to one of our Mark Tick Pro Max supporters here on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining. Um, they do bring up the people who are coming in here. You can read up the details if you feel like it. We are looking primarily at people coming from Vision Pro to now being the leaders of Siri. So he is clearly looking at people he feels confident in, and he feels just, I guess, good at working with. Gonna be interesting. And there are some other internal changes, like the potential uses of third-party LLMs for internal development. However, I don't see those individual changes as big stories by themselves. It's the reason why I'm covering this is because after the delay, after we know that Mike Rockwell was chosen to replace Giandrea as the Siri lead, right? I think that now we have a more clear understanding of what is happening. There are internal policy changes, like the use of third-party LLMs. We don't know. Maybe Apple goes really deep with OpenAI and some of the Chinese AI companies. Maybe they will buy and license some LLMs from them too. It doesn't mean that those LLMs would be exclusively what is powering Siri and Apple Intelligence, but they could serve as a baseline for Apple to catch up a little bit. Thank you, Angelica, saying it's an interesting topic. I tried. It's been a busy week for me, and it was a less busy week for Apple News and Rumors, so I still try to collect as many fun topics. Great. Loving that you're enjoying this. Yeah, so you can read up the exact and leadership changes that he is enacting. I don't think the names are as particularly interesting here. Yeah, but we'll have to see how that pans out. I do expect to see more Apple Intelligence stuff at WWDC. I think at this point it would be weird to not show anything off. Do I expect to have it launch right with iOS 19? I'm not sure. Some people have said it could. I hope if Apple shows us something at DubDub, first of all, I hope they do provide like a hands-on experience for at least the new Siri. But I also hope that at that point they also give you some more concrete outlook on when it's actually launching, right? Whether it's directly with iOS 19 in September or 19.1 in October, or sometime early 2026. I do hope that they explain that pretty clearly, and then at that point they really stick to delivering on time, because I don't think they can really afford another like delay drama. Now, I have said time and time again, I do prefer a delayed product over a bad product, but I know that the media really liked eating up all that drama. So I hope that with all the new internal changes and the extra time, they will be able to deliver something good with the next gen of Siri. Yeah. So there are no new big topics today. So I just thought we could very quickly react to somebody we don't usually react to that much, and that is Unbox Therapy. His channel is just not technical enough for my liking. It's very mass media focused. So I told you. I mean, that's why he is as big as he is. This is him playing around basically with a dummy or early production model or a mock-up, whatever you want to call it, of the iPhone 17 Air. As always, let me know how the audio and video quality is working for you, and let's get started.
You guys on a previous video, the one in which we unboxed.
So this is actually a good point to start, because I did not react to this video. This was based when we still had the two-tone leaks. By now we are kind of moving away from that. So it seems like we would have just one uniform color here on the glass back. This is also partially why I've refrained from reacting to like mock-ups of the 17 Pro. I reacted to like leaks from supposedly the actual supply chain, and how that like metal chassis or half metal, half glass chassis looked, right? But with mock-ups like these, they are like a definitive statement on a very undefinitive state of rumors. So I usually try to refrain from this. With the iPhone 17 Air, it kind of seems like we have a good understanding of the final design. So plus he covers how thin it is, which is basically the thing that matters most about it. So I thought it was worth looking at. By the way, guys, we are streaming for about an hour in. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. Like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment. You guys see, I love interacting with a lively live chat. Your opinions, your suggestions, your agreements, your disagreements. You can leave a super chat or a super sticker to directly support me here in this endeavor. You can also become a channel member right here on YouTube. So all direct support, all indirect support, just watching the video, it's all very much appreciated. Thank you very much.
This new generation iPhone 17 Pro Max. When I picked this up, this still feels so high quality for like an early version to put your hands on. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten better. Like, we went from like plasticky things to metal things to then really well constructed metal things. So yeah, in that regard, I definitely agree with
stuff they're sending me from China at this point. Anyway, I told you in that video,
I'm probably gonna receive some more of these for different models, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that.
So I received this other box here, and I think inside of this box is going to be something we can handle that is going to be indicative of the iPhone 17 Air, which you may or may not have heard of.
I still wonder if it's actually going to be called, like, for all intents and purposes, I do call it the iPhone 17 Air, and it's a name I do prefer to be the final name. But I wonder if, I mean, we did not really expect the 16E as a naming scheme, so who knows?
So the Air fits in this kind of weird zone where the Pro and Pro Max models got thicker in order to potentially accommodate an increase in battery life, camera components, who knows? So now you've got this secondary.
By the way, I think this mock-up shows one thing really well that I've talked about on this channel. It's like my personal speculation. Where can I see it? Really well, right? You see how the entire camera bump, right? It's elevated the way only this portion would be, right? You can see my mouse cursor, right? And by giving you extra space here, don't forget, these are very thin components. The LiDAR scanner and the LED flash, they're basically just surface level in that regard. So that gives you a lot more internal space to play around with here, right? Whether it's you go all in on battery here, and now you shift around more components here. I don't know, larger speakers, bigger antennas, more cooling for the processor, right? So, like, obviously anything can benefit from more internal space. That is, in my opinion, beyond just the idea. Of course, we have to change the design up somehow. Like, but this to me suggests that Apple really is going for a big iPhone, right? Because don't forget, we are not just getting a thicker chassis overall, we're also getting a camera bump that functionally is volumetrically larger than before. So Apple might, and if my speculation is true, and Apple cannot yet source silicon carbon batteries, higher density batteries, in enough supply to guarantee supply for the iPhone Pro models, because those sell a lot more than probably all Chinese Pro and Ultra devices combined. But before Apple can switch to something like silicon carbon batteries, which are most likely what is coming to the iPhone 17 Air, which is going to be a much more niche product than the base 17 or the Pros, in my expectation is we are going to see a big battery here. Now we have also been rumored some cooling changes. Vapor chamber does not have to be huge, but hell, if Apple makes a vapor chamber that is volumetrically larger than the cooling system that they had before, that would potentially double or triple the effective heat management on the iPhone, I don't expect that to happen, primarily for cost reasons rather than size reasons. But things like speakers, microphones, all that stuff that is usually forgotten on spec sheets. Don't forget, for example, the iPhone Pro has one more speaker than the Galaxy S24 Ultra or 25 Ultra, right? And you might argue, well, is that really necessary, right? But it's a decision that Apple made, and it's a decision that however little space it eats up more space. Apple has the best haptic motor system. OnePlus is good. Samsung's is very situational. Isn't always great. I don't know how good Google's Pixel's devices are in terms of haptics. I admittedly haven't had that much experience with Google devices in recent years. Speakers, again, basically only the Galaxy S Ultra is the model to match the latest iPhones, and even then I think the 16 Pro sounds definitively better than the Galaxy S25 Ultra. While they have similar peak volumes, I do think that the clarity on the 16 Pro is a lot better at those higher volume levels. I think the bass is better. So those are just things that can be improved by having more internal volume.
Increase in battery life, camera components up to the Pro Max, and how much smaller and most importantly, how much thinner it is considering they're calling it Air. And who knows, this might not even be
we don't yet know if they're calling it Air.
the last model that we get our hands on before the launch of the actual iPhone 17. So make sure to
Yeah, maybe.
hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos, because they might keep
I guess there would be room for new like mock-ups and dummies if we find out that there won't be like this two-tone look.
sending me these things. Jeez, look how many are here. What are all these models? They're probably going to keep sending me all types of information, so make sure to subscribe. Cool. So we have the standard models in here as well, and we can see, oh my goodness, that's the Air. Whoa.
Yeah, we are basically looking at iPad Pro level
That is
thickness.
cool. I'm gonna put that down for a moment. We got another
except
Air.
for the camera
Okay,
bump,
so
of
we
course.
got the full deal, and we even had a case. Wow. No, it is not a later case, but it is a case, and the later case is gonna look a lot like this. Of course, it'll be made out of Kevlar instead. Look how real this stuff is. Okay, so
Guys, buy Pitaka instead. Please support an actually good German company in that regard.
be clear, like this is obviously going to be your Pro Max, and now we have verification that that is going to be our dimension. These two are basically identical.
I mean, yes, verification is a strong word here for dummies.
Identical thickness, identical height, identical width. So now that's two separate manufacturers that have sent.
That is not really how it works in this stage of development. It's likely that two places can get wrong information too.
Sent me mock-ups of the 17 Pro Max, and they are identical, and this one actually has the dimensions listed.
I should know though that I do fully believe the thickness and overall size predictions for the 17 Pro. I'm just not sure on like the two-tone look on the back, which as a case manufacturer, that's probably not something you even really care about that much.
So here we have 163.04, 77.59, and 8.75, obviously in reference to the thickness. Now, when we move over to the Air model, goodness gracious, is this thing gonna bend? This is crazy. Oh my God. Let me tell you something. If they find a way to make this strong, they are gonna sell a boatload of these things. I am telling you right.
I always find this a fascinating notion, how people are suddenly so excited about the thin iPhone despite like their reviews focusing so much more on things like battery life and camera performance and display brightness and peak performance in games and stuff like that, all things that suffer from having a thinner body. There is still one like completely like dead on arrival thing for me about the iPhone 17 Air, and I know some people won't care because they always use AirPods, and some people just don't care about speaker system. But supposedly, instead of giving you a bottom speaker, they're giving you a much plus the front speaker. They're giving you a much beefier front speaker, right? But then again, the current front speaker is a lot less beefy than the bottom speaker, so you kind of would need a very, very, very beefy front speaker, and even then you now don't get the actual benefits of the stereo separation. Ugh, yikes. This is the one thing that I just really don't. At that point, I would be more supportive of removing MagSafe than I would be of removing stereo speakers.
Now, that feels futuristic.
My expectation is they might put in 2 speakers in the front to still call it stereo, but
How they're gonna make it strong, I don't know. Don't put it in your back pocket, I don't know. I sort of have a history myself of never
nobody cares.
mind. This episode has been sponsored
Like the iPhone 6 bend gauge shit was so freaking stupid.
by Opera. Specifically will allow you to organize prompt and ARIA link to get you started.
Oh my god.
Wow. Is this case for this? It is. Case
1/10
ruins it.
over
Don't put a
1/10
case
of
like
the
this on
videos
here.
in
Put a
ads.
later case because this makes it feel too fat. It's not that fat. You want to appreciate how thin it is. Holy! I mean, it's not gonna be this rigid. This is just a model. I know it's not half, but it feels like
I mean,
half.
it's probably going to be more rigid than that because it is going to have a more substantial internal system than this
Somehow.
one.
What? It feels like half. They say 5.65. Are they talking about the thickest point or the
No,
thinnest
the
point?
thinnest
We
point.
need to know. Okay. Yep. The thinnest point, 5.65. Let's go back to the Pro Max, the fat boy here. It's crazy how this feels antiquated now. Like, this feels like an absolute...
Yeah, I mean, that's... I don't think he is going to go into much more detail. But yeah, I like that statement, how it makes the thicker main boys feel antiquated. I actually, like... iMac 2012 reveal, right? Phil Schiller made a similar statement back in the day.
iMac. The iMac is the best all-in-one.
So that one had a laminated screen, completely reworked internals, right? It was actually the very first Mac that I ever had, the 27-inch version of that one.
Absolutely beautiful.
I'm not sure if this is going to get my video demonetized. But he made a statement that how something... Oh, there it is. There, it should be here.
Well, to explain it, let me bring back up the previous generation. Isn't it amazing how something new makes the previous thing instantly look old?
Yeah,
It's
so if you didn't think that I was an Apple nerd, yes, I do know my Apple keynote reveals by heart, at least the major ones that really interested me personally. But yeah, very interesting how thin the iPhone 17 Air looks, definitely. But again, it's not shocking given that we have even thinner products in Apple's lineup, right? Even the thicker 11-inch iPad Pro is actually thinner than the 5.6 millimeters, 5.65 millimeters that the iPhone 17 Air is rumored to be on its thinnest point. And its camera protrusion is far smaller too. So the fact that some people are acting like it's the best thing since very thinly sliced bread is slightly weird to me, but hey, that's kind of what you have to do. You kind of have to overhype things a little bit. Yeah, but with that, that's kind of it. Let's see if we missed anything. Doesn't look like it. Don't think we missed anything here either. Yeah, I will be back obviously to cover more leaks, news, and rumors. But as you can see, we haven't yet gotten so much big news stuff. I mean, the biggest things I did cover in my previous video a week ago, where it's about like new iPads, new Macs, and stuff like that. But even that is very much like we still don't have full-on details about like how fast is going to be the M5 chip or something like that. And honestly, we know that an M5 chip is coming, right? We know Apple is going to have C2 cellular modems. It's just at this point we're kind of getting to the stage where it's not the mere existence of those newer chips and devices powered by those chips that is interesting, but actually knowing how much better is something going to be. And that is probably something we are either going to find out only when those products actually come out or very shortly before that. No chance we are getting like accurate M5 performance predictions like in the next month or two, for example. Yeah, but I will cover whatever else is interesting, whether it's design leaks, feature leaks, and redesign leaks for iOS 19, the Mac, the latest, the new version from Mac OS and iPad OS that's coming at DubDub. So yeah, keep your eyes out for that. Subscribe to the channel, like this video to help it out with the algorithm. Share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment, don't just comment live, but also comment right after, because that helps with the algorithm. And you can leave, whenever you catch me live, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker to directly support this channel, or you can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out again to Angelica, Steve, and Max Maximus, who are MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. And of course, as always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next. This is MarkTech, tuning out.